can for the last time of a Game of Thrones.
What up, and welcome to another episode of Brotherhood Without Manners, your favorite full spoiler reread podcast of George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series. I'm Nate. Joining me as always, my brother, this guy over here.
Concerned about your eardrums, Zach from Nate's Screaming What Up. But
I came
what up?
in heavy. So we're not rereading anything this episode.
No, we have finished a Game of Thrones, and if you've been reading with us, that means you've finished a Game of Thrones. So give yourself a pat on the back, yo. It's a hefty book to make it through, and we've done it. Book 1 under the belt, and goddamn, what a book it is.
What a fucking great book.
So, yeah, we're kind of going to loosey-goosey this episode. I've got some bullet point notes. Nate took none.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just throw me
No,
under the bus.
immediately.
I have notes, maybe. I just kept them in the notebook that's not
But we just
currently
wanted
here.
to wrap up, talk about a Game of Thrones, and probably make it a little more personalized. Just starting off, you had this book kicking around the house for a couple years. And I remember we're getting real personal.
And so I had the
I would
old,
take it. It was the old floppy paperback ones, but they were
big
big.
one.
Yeah,
the big,
And I would take that Game of Thrones into the bathroom with me, and I would always try to read it. And I would get to halfway through Bran 1's chapter, and I was like, nah. Because my biggest thing was like the names. It was too Lord of the Rings for me, and that was always my biggest turnoff with Lord of the Rings.
And it's so funny how on Lord of the Rings, the names at the very least.
Well, I mean, now it's, I can spew the names of the random fucking characters. Salador San and those type of people. Morocco, like these people that.
His dog's
and it's similar to me because I've tweeted about it, we've talked about it. We both loved Harry Potter growing up. We also both enjoyed a book series called Pendragon, and we can. Back in our prime, it might take a couple minutes now, but we could do the same thing with Harry Potter, with Pendragon, of naming
dates and facts
so Game of Thrones obviously feels much more adult, but
it's not to put down those other series in any way. It's much more expanded upon. It's a massive universe. There's so much.
You get as much as you put into this book. Yeah. Like if you want to look between the lines, there's plenty to look at there, and if you just want to read it through. For the action, the battle bits, the fun intrigue, that's there too. And so it's really however much you want to delve in between the lines and look at what's... So just jumping in...
well, we had mentioned in the very first, way back when, the introduction episode, that I had been gifted the book from a friend at the time who thought I might be interested in it. And that was back, there was a time before there was an HBO series about the book. And it was like I was surprised how much I got into it because I was never big into that kind of political intrigue. I preferred the high fantasy mages throwing fireballs across the fucking orc army, all that crazy stupid shit, which is still something I enjoy heavily, obviously. But to find these books and then. For years, and I get people not being interested at certain times. You specifically like to fucking hold out for years before you.
I mean, and I've also said it for years. I wouldn't have had the appreciation that I do today if I read them then. I wasn't ready for these books. I wasn't ready to devolve this much time. I don't think that was the right word, but to devote that much time to a book series like this. That again. The more you want to look into it, and that's my favorite thing to do, is to theorize, to read these books, think about these characters and the choices they're making, and guess what's going to happen next, or what could happen next, or these outcomes that may have happened if something didn't happen. And so with this, there is endless possibility to do that. We could do that with our current characters.
And that's what's fun
We
now.
could do that with the past. We could do that with the future.
Seeing how different it is rereading it with that analytical, because, we've reread it a few times each at this point.
Yeah.
This isn't our first reread. But never have we gone through taking notes, jotting down names, putting down dates and quotes.
Yeah.
And the amount of knowledge that you gain from doing it that way. I thought I was pretty knowledgeable on Game of Thrones prior.
I mean, that's why we wanted to start it.
Yeah,
we thought we had a general basic knowledge of where we could explain, and we have many times both you and I individually have gotten people into the series, either the show or the books, by explaining what they are in a way that appeals to them. I know a lot of people that I've talked to and had watched the show or read the books that weren't into the high fantasy, and that was a selling point that I could use. There isn't a lot of magic. That's the whole point of it.
Yeah.
The magic's very minimal, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's not what I'm expecting, because it's, this sword and shields. I'm expecting a mage from a tower throwing a fireball.
Exactly.
And
so it's fun to see. You had mentioned characters, and how, we know the main ones, the ones who have point of view chapters, and even the ones that are major characters besides our point of view characters, those Theons and the Jane Pools and the fucking, all those, pretty big major side characters.
Yeah.
But when you're really looking into it, you start seeing, like, Stevron Frey,
their
Sir Mayo,
what
these
they're
people.
doing.
You're hearing these rumors through all these, there's so much more detail on specific characters that you're like, I never even knew this guy's fucking name. But here he is being referenced here and here. And even in, it's a pretty easy one to pull out now. And so it's a good example is Beric Dondarrion.
Yeah.
Where, upon your first reading, you're hearing about this guy 7 different times by 8 different titles and not realizing it's all the same dude. But when you go back and see these names, you're like, holy shit, like, Rob's referencing him.
Yeah.
Cat's referencing.
We get his
Tywin,
movements throughout the whole book.
Where he's going.
Where he is.
And where he's been and what he's been doing.
And that's, that's lost in translation on your first read through, because you're so devoted to this Stark family, this seemingly the heroes of the book, against these evil Lannisters, and then, your feelings start to change about the Lannisters, where, there's some good and there's some bad, but, for the most part, I don't just wish death upon them just as a solution. Like, that these are interesting characters.
Like, you want to find what their motives are and what is causing,
so I, just in some of my noting here, I noted that the title is always important. So in A Song of Ice and Fire series, we start with the Game of Thrones, which I think is one of the most telling things about the book. We're getting, and George is brilliant in it, and it's the first book in a series, so it should, but we're getting the establishing foundation of the past, of Robert's Rebellion, of the Targaryens and their usurpation from the throne, the treasons and betrayals and tensions between the different houses of the realms, the lore of the old gods and the 7 gods and the children of the forest and the wall. We're getting the foundation of all that's come before, so that we as readers now can start to build on that platform.
Well, see, I think it's super cool, because the way he's doing it. Like you said, he's building this all up. He's giving us that foundation, really, so that now he can come in and just flip it upside down.
Well, that's
now I'm going to pull this aside, and now I'm going to twist this.
He makes us think that it is this series will be about the Game of Thrones. It's about who ends up on the Iron Throne. When that, we know, really isn't the case. It's mentioned a few times in this book itself. Is it really when the dead start to walk, does it really matter who sits the Iron Throne?
Right.
And so this book really is about the politics. This house gets along with this house because of these reasons. This house is against the kingdom and against the king for these reasons. It is this political,
and that's it.
But to give us that foundation,
now you know why
to
these
crumble
people,
it all.
Exactly, because now going into Clash, it's going to be, you understand why these kings,
relationships
why these guys are here, why they're moving here, and so that, because it's going to give that twist. We'll stick with that topic of titles, Clash of Kings being next. He built that foundation in this world for us now. We understand, in a broad sense, how the world works. Yeah, we don't understand everything that Varys is doing. We don't understand what Littlefinger's got
or the
planned.
Children of the Forest, that stuff.
But we know that, the North worship Children of the Forest gods, these old gods. We know that, we don't even know much about the Iron Islands at this point. And so there's all these other parts of the world that we don't know, but he's built up, why the Lannisters are, or how they're going to react. You get what they're moving towards, how they should respond. And he emphasized that whole thing with the Ned chapter by killing Ned off, because he was like, I've built this world, now let me show you how it really works by killing Ned. Now we see, this isn't this Game of Thrones isn't what we thought.
Yeah, no,
like this is a much
and he
more...
even does that with Dany across the Narrow Sea, where a lot of her choices and motivations are to get on the Iron Throne again. And so he really does good at making this first book about the Iron Throne, but that's not what the story is in any capacity.
So I've never thought about it this way, but we've mentioned a lot throughout this reread about how, you know, in the future Dany's chapters are going to kind of peter off for our interest, you know, or they have in the past.
Yeah.
The next book is called Clash of Kings, and so it kind of makes sense that Dany's just kind of off doing her...
Well, I was actually, when you just mentioned Clash of Kings before now, I was thinking that it's interesting because we end book 1 with what? King Joffrey, King Robb, King Renly.
Right.
So we don't have the war of the Five Kings. As we know, it becomes the War of the Five Kings. But so you go into this book thinking, oh, the Clash of Kings is between Joffrey, Robb, and Renly.
Right.
But then we get Stannis crowned and Balon crowned all in this next book. And so it becomes this War of the Five Kings. And that's just, it's brilliant because it's George basically... You go into the next book and you read the title Clash of Kings and you think you have all the info. Okay, it's going to be Robb versus Joffrey versus Renly. Like, cool. Triple threat. I'm down. And then in the book we learn, oh no, Stannis. Right off the bat, Stannis is another contender. And then later on, Balon Greyjoy now wants to pull his shit again. And so what the knowledge we think we know coming out of book 1 gets heavily fucking skewed in book 2. And it's just brilliant, which... leads me into point 2. Book 1 starts with prologue Bran. Book 2 goes prologue Arya. And so 2 books starting with 2 very young Stark children.
Yeah.
And do you think there's any significance to that, or?
I think a part of it is Martin saying these are 2 very important characters. You know, obviously, I think that's supposed to be said. But again, I think you mentioned it in that very first Bran chapter that he wants to show the world. You know, you need to see certain things right now. I want them to come from a specific point of view.
So that's where my thinking went. So next, I would just reasonably follow that. So he wants us to see post Ned world through Arya's eyes first.
Yeah,
which is so interesting to me going into Clash of Kings. She is essentially at this point, besides, I mean, I don't want to say the most cut off, but she's in sort of the most precarious situation.
She's the only one that can show us what she shows us, obviously.
The countryside.
The countryside. And even before a little later, like she starts pretty, you know, there's certain things right outside of King's Landing. And
that's
all
it,
that,
the war prep.
You know, Sansa's inside. We're seeing what's happening outside through her eyes. And again, you know, Martin could have very well been like, you know what, I'm going to give Yoren a fucking point of view chapter this time. But he wants it from that children's point of view. There's different ideas and thoughts that they're going to put into the world, misinformation even, that will benefit his storytelling.
It's so good. So, as our little French fry Julian pointed out, the Starks are pretty clearly painted as the heroes throughout the book, but we learn... that.
So,
and it's set up as Starks versus Lannisters. So essentially, it begins as good guys versus bad guys. You're 8 chapters in, and you're pretty sure that the Lannisters are the ones we're supposed to fucking hate. Maybe the little dwarf is cool because he's funny.
I just want to point out that I think it's funny. That's our perception, and yet this whole time, Dany's off on the side, like. We were rooting for her. Like she's the good guy
but
too.
But we don't count her in with what's happening.
She's never, and you don't look at her as part of the good guys or bad guys. Technically, you see her as this. Oh, that poor girl. Oh, she's good because she's this poor young girl.
But I think it's great because the Starks and the Lannisters are just mirrors of each other. Where the Starks, we get their best traits first, and then we start to see how blatantly flawed everyone in this family is. They all have something bad about their personality. Bran is a stubborn little child to a fault. He thinks he's a little smarter than he is, and
they all have that ego, that cocky confidence.
Sansa has her sort of fantasies and not living in the real world. Arya has her temper in that Stark Lyanna quick flare temper. Yeah, it's something to be proud of in the North. That's a flaw. You know, you can't control your tongue. You can't keep your emotions in check.
And I think part of that helps George to lead us to believe they're heroes. Because even like Robb, it's hard to find more of his.
Well, that's the point I'm getting to, is that we see their best sides first, and then we learn that the Lannisters, we see the worst of them first,
right?
And then we get
later
and
on.
So by the end of book one,
even in this book, we see why some of Cersei's motivations.
Absolutely,
my children.
Cersei isn't just a monster in this, and Tywin, which is where Julian called me out on, saying that Tywin was pure evil. No one on either side is pure good or pure evil. Catelyn is just as capable of violence as Tywin Lannister or Cersei Lannister is. I bumped the table for the last episode.
Yeah,
you
may as well.
And so it's I just love the way it starts the book. Starks are heroes, and by the end of the book, you're like, there really are no fucking heroes or good guys or bad guys.
Granted, going through with a reread also helps knowing, Ned's secrets and how much, because again, all that isn't obvious. The first reread, you don't realize that Ned's got these secrets held this stuff, but seeing this time, it's like you're no better in certain ways. I mean, again, they all have their flaws, and like you said, I've never realized that either. That throughout the whole beginning and middle and towards even now, again, Robb still, it's going to take another couple books to really show his naivety.
Yeah, he breaks an oath
and all that kind of stuff, but. Then at the end, Cersei, we start seeing their motivations. And, it's funny with the Jaime thing early on when he attacked Ned.
Yeah.
You just see it as this arrogant fucking punk ass.
No, he was defending his little brother.
It's his brother's honor.
Yeah.
He was arrogant about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jon Snow and Robb are both arrogant.
Jon Snow would have done Robb would have done the exact same thing if one of them was taken in
Jon was going
to,
leave the wall
for
Robb.
It's fucking great. It's brilliant.
And yet we are, unless you've reread them, you think Lannister's bad. No, and then they killed fucking Ned.
Yeah.
Cersei wanted to send him to the wall.
Yeah.
She knew that because of honorable Ned.
Lannister believes that was a good idea.
Right.
Not Tywin, Tyrion, Cersei. No one is like,
and that's what's funny. Even Cersei knows that Ned was honorable enough that if he came out and made these oaths, he would not say anything.
He would have gone to the wall, kept his mouth fucking shut, and served up there honorably. Probably ended up Lord Commander, but not allowed to do anything. And he wouldn't, because he's bound by the laws that he, as
and he would sit there and brood for the rest of his life. But Joffrey
made his petulant, and so that actually, bringing up Ned and Joffrey and everything, that got me to the theme of choice is just the largest fucking thing that exists, and making choices. And I actually have a quote here that says, "So you see, Jon, I do know, and knowing, I will not tell you stay or go. You must make that choice and live with it all the rest of your days, as I have." And that's Maester Aemon from Jon 8.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of chalks this book up, because these choices, Ned Stark's choices, are still affecting the world around him.
Yeah, with Lyanna and all the...
Jaime Lannister's choices overthrew a monarch. He killed a king and allowed for the sack of King's Landing to successfully...
not to mention the smaller things that have happened in this book that'll have major...
Assaulting Ned Stark in the streets.
Leaving the city, army at River Run to go and attack the brigands that were a trap for him.
Baratheon chose Lyanna over Cersei.
Right.
To his death day, and that seeped into their marriage.
And of course, Lyanna chose Rhaegar over Robert
Catelyn
Baratheon.
chose to seize Tyrion at the end of the Crossroads,
yep.
kicking everything off. Tywin chose to sack King's Landing, betraying his king and killing the former the Targaryen babes. Killing or not killing, as we know, is an issue of whether or not that actually happened. Dany chose to let Mirri Maz Duur help heal Drogo.
Yeah.
It's all these choices that people are making, and that brought me back to the past of Ned Stark's choices are still that's what this story is being built on, is Robert's Rebellion and what occurred in that time.
Yeah, well, that's what's funny, is that we're getting this middle point where he's laying the foundation by telling this story, but there's so much vagueness to the past.
And that's what I love. This is not Ned Stark's story.
Right.
It never was. Ned Stark's story was the Tower of Joy, was him bringing Jon to Winterfell, and that's it. Taking this lie to his grave. That was Ned Stark's story, and so he tricks us into thinking Ned Stark is going to be our protagonist. And
really,
it's
it's more of a Ned is Mufasa and Jon is Simba.
Yeah,
and they started out where it's earlier on than you would normally expect that pull. You don't expect them to throw the the death too soon. And so we get so attached to Ned over this book that when it happens, it's like, you what? It was never his story, though. We were just learning the world through, because he had information we needed from Ned specifically.
Yeah. What was affecting him, the choices he made. And so I thought it was interesting that, it's the first book he's got to establish the world. Yeah. We're getting the gods and the religion established at the same time as we're getting the different militaries and armies.
And we're about to have a whole new one just fucking, like, they were there. They were hinted at and mentioned and sometimes seen even.
And I just think it's this, military and religion and that sort of stuff has been a story told throughout all humankind. So I think that's just a George's clever nod that, it occurs in this world as well.
That, and he's known to be a huge history buff, and so any, kind of references to, because that's essentially what every major war is over, is religion and shit like that anyway. And so to have that being set up, and honestly, it makes me wonder if there's not going to be much more religious involvement. I know we get like the Faith Militant, and like we do get Melisandre from. You're tripping me out, dog.
I was just trying to look at the time.
Oh, okay. You're like leaning into the mic. He's being weird, fellas. But yeah, so we get like Melisandre, we get these religions, but I'm wondering if there's not, similar to the Faceless Men, where we're going to get these factions that are opposing each other. The Red Priests are actually opposing the Faceless Men, are opposing the...
Yeah, because we did get tendrils of R'hllor, but not a real explanation on him.
Danny chapters, we saw some in the in Vestelthrak, right? But yeah, and that's... Man, the prologue is going to be one hell of a chapter.
Just to touch on the gods, we get the old gods, the northern gods, the Stark gods.
We probably get the most, and technically might even be the most misinformation.
Yeah.
Because there's so many stories
with their weirwood trees, their gods' woods, and the children of the forest obviously being prevalent. They're somehow connected and tied into the walls magic.
Which then leads to
Mormont says
all sorts of, fucking giants.
Blood of the first men,
all that stuff.
And so there's some trippy shit there. And then we get the Seven, which are the newer Southern.
They are probably the most...
They feel more modern.
They're the most comparable, I was going to say, to like a Christian.
Yeah,
modern-day
Christian. They feel very
modernized
to me.
They've got the seven gods, all representing different, the mother, the warrior, the smith, all those types.
And so I noted down the different gods because Ned Stark was a believer of the old gods, and he got his head cut off at one of the most holy sites of the seven. And it's just that,
see, that's that opposing,
it's that duality.
It's almost like he's subtly trying to force us into that. You should be recognizing that these are going to start opposing each other.
They're two opposing forces here. The old beliefs and the new beliefs, the old way and the new way.
And we also got that a bit with the learning of, the history of the children. When the first men were coming up, the Andals were coming up and chopping down the werewoods. Well,
that's what it feels like to me, is they're saying Ned Stark worshipped the old gods. His way was a simpler way, where honor meant something, where... looking a man in the eye, shaking his hand, and giving your word was all that was needed to forge a trust and a bond.
Yeah.
With the seven in this new modern way of thinking, that's not at all how it goes.
Yeah, a lie's a lie. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I think it's just that it's the new way versus the old way. Ned Stark's way does not work.
Okay, boomer.
We learned that Ned Stark's boomer way doesn't work. And millennial Joffrey ain't having none of that.
Man.
And so, no, I think that's meant to be the image here with Ned Stark getting his head cut off at the statue of Baelor on the steps of the fucking... It's just an intense image.
It's a wild ride!
So then, each character also tends to have a different mantra that is important to them. So we've got Arya, who has fear cuts deeper than swords.
Yeah, so she's got
as a deer.
Yeah, she's got about 1 million of them because of Syrio Forel. But
Dany
she has some
has, if I look back, I am lost.
Yeah. Yep.
Eddard has Promise Me Ned.
Promise Me Ned.
Sansa, a lady always remembers her courtesies. Tyrion has a Lannister pays his debts, but I also noted that Tyrion, says that a lot in this book. He tends to change his mantras a lot because he ends up with where the whores go after his family is completely...
Yeah, I mean, they all are going to start changing their mantras a bit.
Arya keeps fear because deeper than swords for a while.
She'll keep a couple of them, too, and
I'm
get some
pretty
others,
sure...
but...
Ned Stark's dead, so promise me Ned lasted
that.
about 16 years.
But yeah, I would say that Tyrion definitely, especially when he finally makes that turn, when he makes that villainous, almost, well, because we see how depressed and fucked he gets and after he kills his father. But, so I guess that it makes sense.
I just think it's interesting that they all have these things that they cling to, they hold on to, and mainly the two point of views that don't are both Bran and Catelyn. Bran, I believe, because Three-Eyed Raven shit, he's so far removed that the closest I could get is, put that away. You don't need that for him, but he's just so... about to become not Bran. And then Catelyn, I think it's mainly because she's essentially Stoneheart. She's
Do you think that maybe that's the reason that he's susceptible to if he had... Because all the mantras, in some way, kind of tie them to a relationship, to a person, to people, in one way or another.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas Cat and Bran don't have that, so they're disassociating themselves. So almost like... Well, of course they would be. He would become this emotionless Stoneheart, and Bran becomes a Three-Eyed Raven.
Yeah, maybe that is it. They don't have these...
They didn't tie themselves... tenets. Obviously, I don't want to say that they didn't care for their families. Obviously, that's Kat's driving force. It's that she lost sight of certain things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I just thought it was interesting that there's some people, most of the characters have something that they repeat to themselves.
We'll even see that repeated, too, in the future. When Theon gets how many different,
Yeah, must remember my name.
Yeah.
So, magic. Magic's back, motherfucker! With the comet. The comet brought magic back? We think, maybe?
Who knows? Is that what you think?
Is it just a preordained time in the world's history? Is it...
It's speculation.
Is it the dragons themselves? Did Dany cast a spell and bring the dragons back, and the dragons being birthed brought the magic back? I don't fucking know. I hit the table again. I guess I'm just going extra for this episode.
Do you have any...
I don't know, because
theories
to me it seems like magic's already been up and moving. It doesn't seem like it just got birthed in Dany 10. So, I could almost see it being the comet, where, maybe it's swinging down from the north first and hit... The Heart of Winter.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Because notice the whites have been more active.
Yeah, more active than
and so
normal.
Clearly there's something that spawned that.
The North has been the first place where there's been magical activity,
and then it's being seen throughout other places, and we haven't seen much other magic besides that stuff.
Well, what's super interesting is it goes. We get the whites movement, and then we get Bran noticing it first in the North.
Right.
So. Is it finally passing down from the wall or the Winterfell? And then it goes over to Dany.
Is that a part of the reason that the green dreams are so prominent? Because Arya's going to get it more often. Yeah. We've had hints that she's had a few here.
Yeah.
And Bran, obviously, but Jon Snow as well. Is that because of this magic birthing? And so I agree. I think it might have something to do with that comet re-sparking something, and maybe it's gonna circle the planet for a bit, and then it leaves, and then magic goes away again.
So I also think it's interesting that so essentially at the end of the book one, and it's unless you've really read through, you're not really picking up that magic is being reborn, because they haven't really mentioned that it. Lewin went on a little bit about it, but
and we got the ramblings of a little girl
that magic has died from the world. But I think it's interesting that we as a collective, I'm saying, of a fan basis, assume magic comes back at the end of this book or was building, and the prologue of the next book we get Melisandre, a conduit of sorts of this magic. And so I immediately couldn't help myself, but if you've ever watched Lost, in season 4, the freighter folk get introduced, and there's a man by the name of Mr. Daniel Faraday who comes to the island. And the writers of Lost, I'm a super Lost nerd, so I've watched all the interviews and such. The writers and creators of Lost have said that they started getting into some crazy physics stuff, so they needed Daniel Faraday on the island to explain it to the audience in a way that we could understand. Is that what Melisandre is for the magic? Is she's this lens through which we can view it, that we can start to comprehend it? because
that
she
makes
is
sense.
the first recurring major character that we get
that utilizes claims
magic.
to.
Yeah, and birds a fucking shadow demon out of her vajayjay. Like,
valid point.
Yeah, like she's legit. She does say it's a lot of powders and potions and fuck you
but
bullshit.
There's some real stuff
but
too.
she glamours
and again,
Mance
I was
Raider.
Gonna say,
Like,
again, eventually we'll start getting the glamour and seeing those types
I just
of
couldn't
things.
help but make the comparison of that. Like, maybe this is the mouthpiece Martin wanted to use for magic in the world, as far as the Red Priests and what they can do. And so that I guess that's just me thinking I'm smart.
No, I like that.
So yeah, in the next book, we get some interesting characters. We get Stannis, one of my all-time favorite characters.
We get one of my all-time favorite characters, Sir Davos the Onion Knight.
Seaworth, yes. We get Melisandre herself, of course, who I love. I can't help but love her because she's so interesting and intriguing.
So can I point out that this is all in just the very first prologue
Well,
chapter.
we do get Davos chapters in the next book as well. And then we get Shireen in the prologue. We get Patchface.
Mm-hmm.
And we get Theon chapters in the next book as well.
Yeah.
And so, like, goddamn.
This book expands. It gets so much bigger just because
in case that ain't enough, we got Blackwater motherfucking coming up.
Dude. It's, I love Tyrion and King's Landing. Let me say.
I love Tyrion and King's Landing.
And all, because that's, we got to have some fun and see Ned there in what he's doing and
Tyrion knows
and he would send out what's his name? He's dead now. Jory. But that's about the extent of the
gone but not fucking forgotten, huh?
Fucking Jory
Jesus,
Cassell.
never forget.
He would just there was we didn't get to see anything. The closest we got to see to some of the cool intrigue in King's Landing was Catelyn when he was being escorted there. And so when Tyrion shows up and just starts laying down,
Tyrion loves to play. Yeah,
he knows how to play.
And he plays well.
And he's a top tier player with those other guys, and it's just so interesting to watch and fun to see. And God, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it's good shit. And then just. The War of the Five Kings. Renly becomes more prominent. We get to meet.
It's gonna be cool.
Marjorie Tyrell.
Would you like a peach?
I don't want a peach. Would you eat a peach to your brother? I'm gonna offer you a fucking peach.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And then you're gonna take it to your fucking grave.
So not to be too closely related to Renly, but I like a good peach. So you can fuck off.
Whatever.
I also love Marjorie Tyrell.
Oh yeah, who doesn't? Brienne
way
of
more
Tarth?
than you do. Brienne is
way more than I do. I will fucking stab you in the throat,
I snuck it in.
No, Marjorie Tyrell is like the one in my heart. Natalie Dormer nailed her in the show. I was super upset. Fucking Cersei. But book Marjorie is just something else. So don't you dare. Don't you dare.
I've never been, in the past, until my last reread, in the past I was never a big fan of Brienne.
Yeah.
Didn't care for her. And then last reread, granted, it helped that I found Duncan Egg helped, obviously, but I also realized in my last reread that my favorite character in all of Game of Thrones, or A Song of Ice and Fire, is in her chapters there with Sir Creighton Longbow.
Fucking A.
And he fucking cracks me up because he's the biggest cunt on the planet. But it got me paying attention to her chapters anyway, but I fell in love with Brienne.
Yeah, I didn't like Brienne my first read through either. But
I'm really excited to get to some of her chapters, and even her mentioning, her just appearing, to be able to take some notes, and hopefully we'll get some Duncan Egg stuff out before her chapters actually start.
I think her chapters pick up in Storm of Swords.
Yeah, I think so. And so hopefully we'll get to that, just because I think it'd be fun to have that in the in the barrel.
Plan on doing Duncan Egg. So do you have a whole book inductee for a Game of Thrones?
Yeah, but you wanted to elaborate pretty heavily on yours.
I kind of went into it for this one. So my inductee for the whole book in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, A Game of Thrones, my inductee for the book is Robert Baratheon.
Oh my.
Yeah. For showing a truly unhappy man and how destructive that can be to all those around, especially for a king. He longs for and often lives in the past, in the prime of his youth, even though he now embodies the exact opposite of what he was back then. And there's a quote from Ned: "I must go to Robert and pray he is the man I think he is, and not the man I fear he has become. Robert is not a good person. He is a shell, and he paints the picture of what happens when we continuously are willing to compromise our morals in search of instant gratification. He longed for a woman who, by all intents and purposes, may have been revolted by him, and it seeped into all he did, poisoning his rule, crippling the realm, neglecting his wife and children, and his kingly duties. He fixated and obsessed on this time in his life, and thus, I think, shows the destruction of not being able to let go. And so, Robert, I think, for showing us what we need to know about Robert's Rebellion, that it was all just... shit.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yours?
So, mine's going to be kind of on a similar note there, but almost it's only going to work upon a reread this way. And so, mine's going to go to Littlefinger.
Ooh.
And it's because of the fact that of all the books so far, the first one, he had such a major impact throughout the entire book. And if you haven't reread it,
you don't know that.
You have no idea.
Yeah.
Because without him, the letter from Lysa would have been sent to Kat. John Arryn wouldn't have died. John Arryn wouldn't have died. All these little things that, we assume are the Lannisters, even now. Like, we're under the impression. Technically, we could probably put the pieces together.
Yeah.
If it was but we don't. And he's done all that. He's shifted. He fucked Ned. Like, that was a... Oh, shit.
Oh, man.
And... I hate...
Damn. Those red cells,
well,
man.
I mean, he basically bent him over.
Yeah,
and took him from behind. But, that was a shock the first time I read it. Holy shit. I thought Littlefinger was helping us. Like, yeah, he was a skeevy dude, but, like, I told you not to trust me, you motherfucker.
Littlefinger is playing the game from the second we meet him.
And we have no idea.
And we just don't.
And so I think, not to mention what he's going to be pulling off in the future, because this is an inductee for just the first book, but I think that without Littlefinger, I mean, granted, obviously, Martin's an author. He could probably figure shit out. But Littlefinger spurned on a majority of the events that happened here from the very get-go.
Yeah.
Like, and even still, I mean, I should be giving it to fucking the North and the White Walker War, because even with all that occurring, the very first things that we get actually are
the war,
the White Walkers, and then the beheading. So yeah, Littlefinger, that kind of makes me want to spurn off on a quick tangent, though, that both prologues are very magic heavy, very based in magic. We get the White Walkers, and then we'll get Melisandre and all her shenanigans.
It's back.
So that's cool. But yeah, so I'm going to go with Littlefinger just for that reason. He's been so prominent without actually being there at all.
Sweet. Well, those are our final inductees for the whole book. And we did get a write-in from our friend in France, Julian. And he says, you asked for our opinion on the whole book, inductee, and that is pretty hard. Is it possible to name 3? We'll allow it. So he says, 1, the obvious one. Please, Eddard, join us in the Brotherhood for being the honorable and precious fool we loved for a dozen chapters. You're going to be missed.
So, awesome one, but he has to have a room down at the other end because he's going to stink.
The serious one, number 2, I would like to induct Littlefinger. Because heck, he's the reason the intrigue got us in this first book. And as I don't want Lysa at least 15 miles from me at all times, he's my chosen one. Whole story in mind, he's still the one character to switch sides unexpectedly and betray our main favorite character. He's central, even though we don't witness that much of him for now. And 3, the mysterious one. Chose it already once, but I seriously want to know the deal about Mormont's crow. So I want to induct him, get him drunk, so I can figure out by extorting essential answers from its drunken beak. Go Clash, and thank you for this awesome season of podcasts. Thank you for also reading all my thoughts and opinions and reacting on it. I feel flattered and hope my French TV Game of Thrones guy opinion brings a little bit of perspective to your work. Valor to Harris. Peace.
Peace.
Yeah, great inductees, the 3.
I like the second one the best.
I like the Mormont's Bird one.
No, that's good too.
And thank you for listening. Thank you for writing in, Julian. We appreciate it.
We look forward to all your Clash stuff. You've already gotten us one from a while back that I've got sitting.
And you had asked, we are going to be starting the numbering over. So Clash is, it goes prologue, and then it will be Aria, and that will be Aria 1 of A Clash of Kings. That's how we're going to be doing our keeping track for the
just
second
for
book.
Our own sanity. It's just going to prevent us from being at crazy numbers.
But holy shit, we finished a book on a podcast, which we really never expected to do, and people wrote in and wanted to talk to us, so that's really fucking cool, and we appreciate the shit out of it. And as we've said before, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break while we get a couple Clash of Kings chapters prepared and noted and recorded.
Get some Patreon stuff.
Get some Patreon stuff out, and then we will be back. So it'll only be 2 weeks from the time this episode airs.
When this episode airs, it might be like 17 days, but it's between 2 weeks and no more than 3 weeks.
Bam.
It will not hit that far.
And so, if you
can still write in, though. We're still checking all the socials and the emails and everything like that.
We'll still be active on our socials and everything while we're getting our notes in order. We essentially just want to try to get a little bit ahead. That way, in case life happens, Nate does have 2 young toddler children.
Yeah.
And so, if for some reason we can't record, we don't have to miss a week. So, if you've listened from day one, fucking thank you for dealing with us. If you've joined us along the way, thank you. You're fucking awesome.
Tell your friends. Write in if you want. We can always, again, take your messages. So you can get us on our email, withoutmannersbrotherhood@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, @mannerswithout. Nate's on Twitter, @mannerswithout.
Carstark92 for me.
That's Zach's. We have our Patreon, as we mentioned, patreon.com/mannerswithout. We've got some sample chapters up there now. We are, again, planning to get the Barristan Sell Me one out very, very soon. So thank you to everyone that subscribes to our Patreon. Facebook.com/Brotherhood Podcast. We're always just kind of throwing up some random trash posts up there. That's always fun. And then news of Game of Thrones, whether it be book or George Martin, cool stuff. So follow us. We've got a Reddit. Like, it's popping. I think that's what the cool kids are saying, right?
And that's it, motherfucker. That's season 1.
Season 1.
Season 1, motherfucker. Season 1 done. Join us for season 2, Clash of Kings, the second book in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire series, continuing with A Clash of Kings. Valor to Harris.
Peace.